Are we live now?
We are so live. We're just
Are
going to
we?
wait a second while people join. Are you going to do us a little interlude?
I don't know.
Can
What would
you,
it look like?
I don't know, something holiday-ish?
Yeah. What about if we were to just kind of strum and you make up some lyrics? I'll put you on the spot spontaneously.
Okay, go for it. Happy holidays to you. I don't
Change up. All right.
That's terrible. That's terrible.
So I guess what we need to do is either like
Practice
or
not put the other person on the spot.
We do that, don't we?
That's okay.
But I mean, we do that personally, but I think we as human beings often put each other on the spot. And I wonder what really that's about.
I think it's about maybe because we feel uncomfortable and we want them to save us. I know,
Right.
I know there's been situations on this live where it's like, oh shoot, I forgot what it was I wanted to say. And I'm like, so Andre, tell me what you think.
Right. So you turn to the other person, you put them on the spot that way. Interesting. I had a much more sinister take on it. Yeah, I was wondering if it was a good way of like letting out some of our aggression.
Ooh, aggression.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
Yeah, it seems like a subject that many people in the West are not wanting to speak about is our aggression, that we could, somehow get in touch with it or basically just try to avoid it. When are we ever taught to speak openly, comfortably about our aggression, about our aggressive feelings and desires? I think, very often we are told to kind of just, minimize it, right? So if you are a good civilized little boy, you will not act out that way. And if and when you do act out, you're told to go to your room and reflect upon it, as though that expression of aggression or any kind of so-called negative feelings is not to be tolerated. So we become unfamiliar with it. We don't know a comfortable way of expressing these feelings of aggression. So when do we ever get the opportunity to do so? But the reason why I bring that up is because in relationships, if things are going great, that's wonderful. Things are going great. But what happens when things go a little bit south? What happens when there is opportunity for resentment? What do we do with it? Right. So now all of a sudden, are we just simply sitting on it and yet it's stirring and festering within us? Or are we finding a productive way of expressing it? Either productive in our relationship or productive for ourselves. I mean, what becomes of those feelings and how might we address them and utilize them to our advantage?
Awesome. Well, that's a great topic, which we also talked about several weeks ago. So there is a video in the guides on resentments. Yeah, and what to do with them. So that's a good segue into welcoming everyone joining us for our Mondays with Tara and Andre. If it's the first time you're joining us, we come here live every Monday at 11 a.m.
We do.
Eastern. And if you can't make it live, that's cool. We always keep the replays in the group and they're organized in the guides.
In
the guides.
Yeah, that's easy enough.
Yeah. So, we talk about all kinds of subjects related to polyamory, open relating, sex, communication, resentments, all those things. So
everything under the sun.
Everything under the sun. So if there's anything you ever want to talk about, yeah, let us know.
Right. Good point. If we're not yet talking about it, then please feel free to reach out to us and offer a suggestion. Be kind, please. And not too aggressive. So a little aggression's okay.
Yeah.
And
we like feedback.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting, right? We like feedback. So how are we able to really absorb and incorporate and integrate it, right? Because we might not necessarily want to hear it initially.
Oh, yes.
Right? And I'm thinking back to you.
Me.
My friend Tara. Yeah. Our other friend had come to stay with us for a little bit, and there was some friction. I mean, you put 3 rats in a cage, there's going to be some stuff happening. And at one point, the two of you guys had it out, and there were some things that were said to you about you, and there was, the initial blowback, which I think everybody would have experienced. It's quite understandable. But then you did something quite remarkable. You really absorbed it and really tried to reflect upon it and see what part of it might have been valid, right? And that it's coming from their perspective, but what part might have really been there, and how you voluntarily took it upon yourself to integrate that in a way that you turned it into constructive criticism. You
Mhm.
acknowledge what it was that they were saying, and then you said, okay, what can I do for myself to be different in that way? And that's astounding. That's a real credit to you. I was very impressed with that, and I'd like to try and do those similar things. I'd like to really see if I'm able to. I'm not inviting your criticism, by the way. Not at all. But I would like to self-reflect and see if I can criticize myself and see where I might be able to do better. And it's often wonderful if we do it as a gesture for the other person. That's great that we consider them, but also the idea that we might want to essentially do it for ourselves, right? Are we going to walk through the world with a big, heavy footprint that's full of, confrontation and whatnot, or are we going to be able to walk through life in a much softer, gentler, loving way? And it's for us to decide.
Definitely, that was like a hard situation, but like you said, I think I was realizing that the person, Arzu was sharing some information to us, and to me, and I needed to listen to that. And she said a lot of things that were true, and so you need to listen, and so that's where active listening comes in.
Listening to understand.
And even if you don't agree with it, and just like taking it in. It was hard. It was like a lot of tough things were said, and but you got to listen.
Right.
You do. You can't grow if you don't listen to what other people's experiences are of you. So.
But it's interesting because when people speak about us and they give us a critique of us, I think very often, I know for myself personally, you kind of get backed up and I become defensive, and then I stop listening, and all of a sudden I want to just offer the rebuttal or find ways to justify my position or support myself. And that's it. That's the end of it. And I did not hear the message, right? So credit again to you that you were able to, and that's fantastic.
It's a practice. But anyways, on to today's topic, because this is something that people mention a lot when they're entering the group, and things that we understand from people who come to see us, is how do you shift from rules to relationship agreements that work? So our topic.
Rules to relationship agreements.
Yeah. And some people have different perspectives on this. Some people use rules in the positive, but we'll kind of get into that. So we're going to get a bit personal today and talk a bit about what makes us work. And we're going to share with you our values-based relationship agreement model, which we designed ourselves and use with clients. So let's jump in.
It's so interesting though, right? The idea of talking about rules and views. And some people really, they take exception to that, right? They don't want to have it, like, well, no, like, I'm free to do my own thing, or like, I don't want to be governed, whatever it is. And they're not wanting to use that word of rules. It feels very controlling to them in some ways. But I think what happens also is that when we do have agreements like that, when we do set these parameters, it might also kind of help in our communication patterns so that we know where we are at and we can consent to it. And so it kind of takes away the possibility or the probability of miscommunication because we are being better at communicating. Communicating what these agreements are.
Right, and assumptions as well, right? A lot of times we assume things are a certain way, but if we haven't spoken them, written them down or anything, there can be misinterpretation. People can take missteps without even knowing it. But definitely there's different perspectives on this. I think if people practice relationship anarchy, for example, you might have a very different perspective on agreements and rules and that sort of thing. So
Sure. And what about somebody who's solo, right? Are they going to... how do they make agreements? Where are they going to find that? I mean, they'll do it, I guess, on a case by case with their whoever they come across or they're interacting with, as opposed to having a partner who is recurring. You might have some things set in place.
Yeah, and part of the model, they would definitely do the first part, which we'll get into. But let's just talk a bit about some of the definitions. And want to make a note, because some people, we use the term often, open relating. And if you haven't heard that term, we sort of use it as a broad umbrella term to kind of incorporate all the various types of consensual non-monogamy. So polyamory, open relationships, swinging, relationship anarchy, all of those, hooking up. I don't know. Anyways, so just a note about that. So, so those of you who are watching can be like at different stages in your open relating journey and may have started from different places. So for some people, you may have always been polyamorous or open. And for us, this was something we came to together in our relationship, I'd say. We both had some experiences, right?
Not I wasn't conscious about it being that way, but it was, yeah, there was openness to it in that way for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking back. You mentioned that some people have always been into it. I was just speaking to a person who said that they came into this way of being, this lifestyle, this polyamorous way, when they were 14 and have been
Wow.
at it at 20. Yeah, so they've really only ever known of open relating.
Mm-hmm.
Quite remarkable, right?
Did they know? They didn't know the term though. Sometimes we don't know, because I talked to
I've
someone
not
as
yet asked them.
well.
I'll ask them if they knew of the term, because it's been around for a while now. It's becoming part of our lexicon. Interesting little side note. It was said in one of the groups before about how we might refer to ourselves not as being non-monogamy, but as being polyamory, right? So
Monogamous people as non-polyamory.
right, exactly. Thank you for clarification. Right. So
yeah, which is kind of funny because we had that discussion yesterday.
Right. So they are saying that we are monogamous is the standard, and that we are non-monogamous, right? As opposed to saying that they are non-polyamorous. They are old school monogamous.
Yeah, I don't know what I feel about those. I mean, I don't.
Semantics.
Possibly.
Maybe it really does influence our belief that being anything other than heteronormative, being anything other than monogamous, is just as valid.
Oh, exactly.
We see ourselves not so much as fringe, but as one goes right, one goes left, and neither is better than the other. It's just a way of being.
Yeah, it's just a choice, right?
True.
Yeah.
Is it a choice, or is it an orientation? Are you born that way? Do you choose to be, or are you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm curious actually what people think. So if you're on live or even in the replay, please let us know, because I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I feel for myself, this is my first true, I'd say, open relationship, open relating. I've definitely had some experiences in the past, but I've always had this sense that I had to choose, and I know that I was uncomfortable with those choices at the time, and I always made a choice because I thought that was the only way, right? So I wonder if I truly was more this way.
But I wonder if it's at all parallel or akin to your sexual identity. You are straight, or you're bi, or you're homo, that whatever it is, that some people would say, well, you choose, and other people would say, well, I'm born. And is it the same with relationships? So do we try to modify part of ourselves in order to conform into this model of one and one, or is it just our nature that we are not coupling by nature?
What do you think?
Well, when I look at all of the relationships I had in the past that I created some difficulty, or there was difficulty in being in, I think, well, it just wasn't a good fit for me. And was I, by nature, by my orientation, not well suited for that type of relationship? Because when I would get into it, I think my attachment styles were activated, right? So if I had some kind of insecure attachment, the idea of being with somebody made me feel like either it was going to close in on me, I was going to be strangled by it, or that I might lose them, or whatever the case might be. So in that sense, it did not feel natural to me. It did not feel like it was my preferred orientation or my natural orientation. But was I also perhaps not in the right headspace? Was I not with the right person?
Someone's saying, I honestly feel like this is natural. Monogamy feels like society forcing us into the box. Yeah.
As it is often argued, right? Yeah. Especially if we go back to tribe mentality and think that it is a community.
Humans are naturally non-monogamous. Monogamy benefits the church and government. It sure does. There's lots of privilege associated with being monogamous, and married, and tax, right? And all the things, right?
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. So,
even like when you fill out a form, right? And it asks you about your spouse, as that you might have one spouse or one partner, or and it's still so binary. Right?
Oh yeah, when I see male or female on a form, I just cringe. Like I get that you can't include everything, but have something else, other. Although other is kind of weird too. Right, but anyway.
What are you? I am other.
I'm other.
It's like I'm a third class citizen.
Yeah.
I'm other.
I know. Anyway, so if it is something that's new, I think what happens, like with most people, even with us, I think when you open up, it's like, yeah, it seems like super exciting and, like awesome. Like imagine all the sex we're going to have, or the people we're going to meet, and the dating and the fresh feelings and all that. And then what happens?
Well, you jump out of the gate, and often it is all those things and more, right? It's beyond your expectation. But very often there is the other side that might not have been as fully spoken about or as consciously spoken about, and that is what are the potential downsides, the pitfalls to it, right? What did we not talk about? Because I think, well, depending on the orientation of the person, some people are very optimistic and they want to focus on the positive, and other people are more pessimistic and they're more cautious and they say, well, these are the potentials for it. But either way, I think we should have the space to consider both, right? So yeah, we're motivated to go out and meet other people, but let's talk a little bit about what that might look like and how we might affect a relationship that's going to feel most comfortable for all the players involved. That we might feel as though it is really with our eyes open, consensual, and ethical, and we can do it by choice and know some of the potential consequence and benefits to it.
But if you haven't done that, what happens sometimes is you jump in and then like boom, like all the things happen, like all the feelings, jealousy, insecurity, anger, resentment, hurt. And then, the natural reaction, I think, for people is to sort of like pump on the brakes and then set up rules because they think that rules will protect them from their feelings
and
discomfort. I would say no.
You don't think the rules work?
No, because they're more punitive in nature, right? For some people, they say rules when they're rules tend to be more, we're going to get into it, but they tend to be more negative based, and they might feel like you're wearing a leash and very restrictive rather than being positive and like these are the things that we want in our relationship. Right. So it's shifting the focus, and where the focus goes, the energy flows, right? So if you focus on the negative, you're going to be constantly paying attention to the negative in my feelings.
Right. So the rules might be too punitive, but the leash part might be fun.
Yeah. I mean, a leash in a non-kinky way, but yeah, I've heard clients say that before, as they feel like they have a leash attached to them.
It might feel restrictive and punitive.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So then what do you do, right?
But aren't some rules also put in place to kind of make us feel more secure? Like we both have a rule that is not going to happen, and because we are both participating in that rule, it makes us kind of feel that there's a strong parameter in place that's going to protect us, make us feel like we know where the end of that boundary lies, that it would not be crossed over.
I think by calling, let's do the definition. I think by calling it a rule, you're really let's start with boundaries first.
Okay.
We kind of jumped ahead. So we're going to talk about boundaries versus rules versus agreement.
So we'll talk.
Is that cool?
Let's do it that way. So what do you got for boundaries?
So boundary generally is a line that marks the limits of an area. Ooh, you're going too fast, babes.
I want to see about how you might contrast it with agreements, but okay, continue with your boundary.
So in a relationship, a boundary focuses on you. So usually when people refer to boundaries in open relating, it refers to personal boundaries. Although some people do use boundaries, I think, what's the term? Instead of using agreements or rules, people will call them boundaries, like healthy boundaries. But I like to really differentiate them. I think boundaries are personal in nature, and then what do you need and what are your limits? And then you can communicate those to a partner. So in general, your boundaries, your personal boundaries wouldn't change. For example, you make the personal boundary, and then your partner once you let them know of that boundary, then what they do is sort of up to them rather than being dictated by a rule. For example, like one of my boundaries is I don't like naked, sexy pictures shared of me before I've met someone. So if you're talking to someone we might meet together, that's a personal boundary for me.
I thought your notes indicated that you didn't want to be spanked.
No, that's not mine. I'm just saying that's an example of a personal boundary.
That doesn't seem like quite right there.
That's just a general example. So I don't, like someone might say, I don't want to be spanked, or I want to be able to share my needs openly with my partner. Do you have any personal boundaries that you can think of?
Personal boundary. I think I'm pretty wide open on that. Can you think of any of mine? None are coming to my mind at the moment. A boundary that I have would be that's not an agreement or a rule. No, I don't have anything that comes to mind.
No hitting, maybe.
Depends on the context. I mean, in theory, I'm open to just about everything and anything.
One of your personal boundaries in relationships, though, is yelling. You don't like yelling.
Well, yeah, I mean.
But that's a boundary. That's a boundary.
Okay, fair enough. Good point. Yeah,
I think so.
That's a good reminder. Yes, I don't like to be yelled at. Say everything you want. Let's talk about it. We can even agree to disagree and argue, perhaps. But the tone for me, I think it's triggering when it becomes yelling.
Yeah. So I know that about you. Sometimes I pass that boundary for you, but anyway.
Okay.
It's a work in progress, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's the thing, right? So none of this has to be so absolute. And a lot of these agreements or boundaries or rules, they can be modified in time as well, right? But we should do it collaboratively, right? It should be consensual. We have a dialogue about it. We communicate about it, right? So we find out. But if it's not done to perfection, well, we try our best, right? It is, as you say, a journey. It is progress.
Exactly. So that was boundaries. So rules. So what is a rule?
Okay, so let's see. A rule is a statement that tells you what is allowed or what will happen within a particular system in the case of a relationship. Rules are enforced. When you place rules on your relationship or your partner, you're putting limits on their behavior. Interesting. Rules are often
a definition.
That's a definition. Do you want to talk about that?
We get to it. Yeah, we're going to get to it.
Rules are often based on one person's perception of how they predict they will feel when faced with certain experiences. Having said that, there are articles out there that seem to use the term rules to put forward positive things that you want in your relationship.
Yeah.
So that's what we were saying before about the positive.
Yeah, but I still think like there was an article in Women's Health. It was like 8 rules you should be following if you're in a polyamorous relationship. Which is so interesting that magazine like Women's Health would write about that. But they were all like sort of good things like deciding how much you want to share with each other, communicating, making time for each other. But to me, like, I think that's more of an agreement. Like when we talk about how our values-based agreement, I wouldn't say that's a rule. And then the question is like, if there is a rule, then what happens if you break that rule, right? Consequence. The rules seem more like negative and consequence. So some unhealthy rules that we've heard of in open relating.
Like the veto rule, right?
Veto, veto. I can approve. I must approve of all your partners, and I can deny you of a partner.
Yeah. So why is that not a good rule? What's the exception about that? What do you think is the danger there?
If you're in a coupled situation, I think it sets up a bit of a privilege sort of thing, and it takes away some of the autonomy, and you may be denying oh hey Lucy from London, you may be denying your partner another partner because you're jealous or or insecure, or like they're like, my thing is like, I was always like, oh, they're cooler than me. So if I said to you, Andre, I must approve all your partners, then I might, if someone seemed cooler than me, I would say, oh no, you can't date them.
So for me, we get to the interesting part is what is the rationale? What is the reason? What is the need behind having rules?
Yeah.
So what is it meant to do?
Well, they're meant to protect yourself. You think that if I approve all your partners, that it's going to protect me from feelings of jealousy. Right. So not only do I feel like it's not right to do that in general, because it's also not fair to those people, is that I don't think it really works. If you feel jealous and you think that you're approving someone's partners is going to make you feel less jealous, I think you might need a bit of work on those things, because I don't think it's going to meet that end, right?
So, I think you're right. So basically the rule is looking to try and control the outside environment in order to alleviate your feelings of discomfort, your feelings of insecurity.
Well said.
Yeah. So if you were able to
so smart.
Sometimes. So if you are able we'll see about that. So if you are able to create these greater feelings of security within yourself, then you might be able to lessen these rules.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that you shouldn't have any rules, right? We don't want to necessarily live in a lawless society all the time. Some rules might still be agreed upon, and we might find them to be mutually beneficial.
Right. And then I think when if you're just starting or opening up an existing monogamous relationship, the things that you sort of discuss tend to be more on the side of rules. But I still feel that there's opportunity to make them into more agreements rather than punitive rules. So.
Right. You have another rule that is quite common, that people, when they start out, they say no falling in love.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you like that one. Or you like to not like that one.
Yeah, because I don't think you can prevent that in some ways. And then how do you define what it means to fall in love? Like, what does love mean to someone? Love is such a broad term, right? We love a lot of things. Love people in many different ways,
Sure.
right?
But how do you prevent something like that? So I'm working with a couple right now where one of the people started seeing somebody else, and their partner became very aware that what their partner was feeling might have gone beyond NRE, the new relationship energy, that they were catching deep feelings. And the person who was talking about their partner's new experience was fantasizing that, well, perhaps in the spirit of not falling in love, they should not see this person anymore. So they became aware of the emotional investment, found it to be potentially dangerous to their relationship, and thought, you know what? One way of preventing falling in love is if you do find yourself catching deep feelings for the other person, then just simply stop seeing them. I have a lot of thoughts about that.
Well, I just think, I even if you did stop them from seeing them, I think it probably would have the opposite benefit. Don't you think it would make them desire them or want them more, or fantasize more about what that relationship could be? And then you could also then resent your other partner for imposing that on you, preventing you from seeing that person.
And in a way, doesn't it run counter to polyamory? Because polyamory means many loves.
Yes. But people have a different definition, right? Like some people are very selective about what they do outside their relationship, right? And you know, even us, we met with a couple recently, and you know, they're very, very brand new, and they've decided that they only do things together, which I mean, for them is comfortable. It was sort of interesting. In preparation for this, we did chat with them a bit about what kind of agreements they had, and they did share some things, but it was quite interesting to see when people are just beginning the types of things that they're sort of valuing their relationship, right? But
I think the idea is don't fall in love really speaks to my biggest fear, and that is that I'm going to be disposed of. I'm going to feel insignificant. It speaks to my insecurities, and if you were to go out and catch feelings for this person, where would it leave us? Where would I be?
Yeah.
So if I can somehow, you know, mastermind this plan to prevent the other person from having feelings, I will suddenly create a greater level of safety. And I don't know that that actually is the reality that is created. As you say, it could lead to resentment, or it simply finds some other outlet to it. What is best is when we feel that we are secure within ourselves, and then we can withstand whatever might happen.
Exactly. And I think you want someone to, like, what I love about our relationship is, I said this to someone the other day, was that you constantly are choosing me over and over and over again. So even if you have other partners and you meet with them, and even if you fall in love with them, I mean, even our friend Arzu, you know, you guys love each other very deeply. And, you know, what would it serve if I said, you know, you can't see her? And, you know, also you still choose to be with me all the time, over and over again. Anyways, that's my perspective.
So the takeaway then is perhaps look at what your motive is in wanting to create these rules, and what purpose might they be serving. So where is that driver coming from? What's lying behind that, right? So am I wanting to create these veto rules that you can't go out with anybody who's cooler than I am because I feel as though I'm not cool enough?
Yeah.
Right. So see if, I think it's pretty safe to say the majority of them will be fear-based, and see how you are able to address these fears and you know, take it from there. But find the freedom from your fear.
Right. And we also want, you know, people to shift more to a positive base agreements. But the other one I want to mention in terms of rules is sometimes people, if there's a situation where there's a couple, like a nesting couple or primary relationship, that the one partner will want to know everything about the other person, like all the intimate details about that, like all the intimacy details. And, you know, I think there can be a level of sharing, but the thing I would be concerned about that is protecting the other person's privacy as well. Like, you know, sharing intimate details about your relationship with your partner can be disrespectful to them.
Yeah, what right do I have to announce their things? So that's an interesting consideration. But again, it makes me wonder, what is the driver in the demand to know everything? How will that make me feel more secure? What will those answers do for me? Or will they simply feed my fears and make me think, wow, they drew that? Like, I didn't know that was even possible. I didn't know that was a thing. And does it really upset me that much further?
Well, sometimes
Careful
also,
what you ask for.
yeah, and some people have the opposite. Like, I don't want to know anything about it.
Don't
like,
ask, don't tell.
Yeah, don't ask, don't tell. But the problem with that rule sometimes is that then what happens, you make that rule so that you are trying to protect yourself from feelings of jealousy or insecurity. But then what you do is you do fill in the blanks.
Oh, yeah.
And create a bunch of meaning.
Create your own monster.
Create your own monster, which can be worse than the actual monster. So maybe there's a level of sharing. But if you have other partners, then I think that they should be aware of what you're sharing. Now let's move on to.
So do you ask your partner, is it okay if I share this with you? Is it okay that I share that you have a heart-shaped, bruise or birthmark on your derrière?
Yeah, I think you would have to
identify
ask that.
Yeah, probably. Well, I think it's always best to err on the side of consent, right?
Yeah, consent. Yeah, ongoing consent. All right, so let's move on to agreements. So
what about them?
So agreement is an arrangement, like in a relationship, arrangement or contract. Some people actually have contracts in which people agree to what is to
notarized?
be. I don't know if they're notarized. What is to be done in that relationship. So agreeing to something is something that you will do, accept, maybe even allow, that's suggested or requested by another person.
Like aftercare. Has that been an agreement? Maybe.
Yeah, you can say that it's important.
That we check in with each other, check-ins, those are agreements?
We'll get into it.
Okay.
You're always like excitedly jumping ahead. So the idea behind agreements is that all parties are agreeing to them rather than being enforced by one person to another. So I'm not imposing a rule on you. We have an agreement based on discussions.
There's mutual consensual.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think another thing to say about this is if we are in other relationships with people and we have certain agreements that could impact them, that we share those things.
True.
I've had situations where a couple had some agreements between them about what they would do. There were probably more rules, but anyways, they had certain rules and there was another person involved and the other person wasn't aware of those. And so while one person in that couple would have been aware of what that rule was and could have stopped that thing from happening, the other person didn't know and inadvertently broke that rule that they had for agreement. So
how did they recover? What happened then?
Lots of discussion, and it was a real thing about trust, right? And then the other person felt like very separate and very on the outside of that relationship. So it was difficult for them as well because they felt bad because they cared about both people in this situation. And they broke this rule they didn't even know existed, right?
Didn't know existed. Aha. So we did not communicate.
Yes, communication, yeah.
Which leads to misunderstanding, right? Misinterpretations, all kinds of things that could go south. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So then how do you make agreements that work?
Well, that makes me think of the design that you came up with, right?
Yes.
Let's hear it.
We call it the values-based relationship agreement model.
Values-based relationship agreement. Okay.
Patent pending.
So it's based on our values, based on our things that we find to be important collectively as a partnership.
Yeah, so it's based on values rather than setting up rules. So we build out an agreement based on what we personally value and what we value in our relationship together.
Sounds fair. Okay, I like that. Sounds collaborative.
Yeah, it's collaborative.
Good.
So with most things, before like jumping into agreement with someone or setting up rules, we do some introspection.
Right. So we're going to gather information from ourselves first. Right?
Yeah.
We're going to inwardly, and we're going to find out how we feel about certain things, what things are important to us, what things are less important to us, our position, so that we can communicate it to the other person. And then we will listen actively to understand what the other person is saying, so we might integrate that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So good information.
Yeah. So step one, pulling together your own core values and what you value in your relationship. So this is something you would do on your own first. And like you said, and so some of the things that you could look at are the 6 basic needs. So we all have these needs, but how we rank them is different. So these can be a way of starting. So certainty, variety, significance, love and connection, growth, and contribution. And then there are other values that you might you have as well, like consideration, honesty,
intimacy, connection, stability.
Yeah, security. Those sort of things.
Okay, cool.
And then, like you said,
once you've gathered that, then you're going to communicate it.
Yes.
Okay.
So you tell me, like I tell you, we talk about what it is, share with each other what it is we value.
Right. So I know we've said this like ad nauseum, but I think it's worth repeating again. So when we are having this exchange of ideas, when we're speaking in a conversation, it's great that we communicate. But the way that we communicate is we have a message and we deliver it, right? We are the sender, and then the person receives it, they get the information, and then they send it back to us. But in order for it to work successfully, we have to be able to be emotionally present. We have to be able to listen actively to understand. And what happens, and I know this firsthand because I do it all the time, is somebody says something and I get inspired, and all of a sudden I'm thinking about my rebuttal and I'm like off here, and I no longer hear what you're saying. I'm not active in my listening. So how can we really go about and set our intention to be engaged in listening, so we can be good recipients of those messages, so that when we deliver our message, it's also going to a very good recipient who's also going to be able to understand, integrate, and address those parts too. And it sounds automatic and everybody's, yeah, it's called talking, but it is the foundation from which we will build our little establishment, right? So we need to have good forms of communication.
I was looking for, like, I hoped we had that diagram where it had the interaction and the fact, but I don't have it. Not uploaded.
It's in the wind someplace.
It's in one of our other things on communication, I think.
So you say once we have the information, then we can compare and contrast our notes and find out where there's overlap, where we might want to make some modifications, find out what's working, what's not.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I mean, I didn't write it in our notes, but the other thing I think we need to think about too is where there are big differences. Like if you have a certain value that's super high, and for me it's either non-existent or lower, like how do we reconcile like that? How do we, what are our values?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the markers that I use, and I don't think it's absolute, but it's like, if it's important to me, is it important to you? And vice versa. If it's important to you, does that mean anything to me? If you really come out with it and it's like an 8 or a 9, am I impressed by that? Do I say, well, you know what? It's not part of my value system, but I can really appreciate that it is part of yours. And as such, I'll make considerations for that. I will at least be willing to talk about it and address it so that we can come to something that would be agreeable for us.
Is it like the GGG principle? Is it the game, like games? So if it's something maybe I don't value as much, but I can see that it's important to you, can I build that value into our
that's a great
arrangement?
I guess you can, up until the point where it might become a resentment, or you might feel that, right?
Yeah, no, it'd have to be something that you are fine with, like you're okay or neutral with, or is
so as long as you're not objecting to.
Yeah, not objecting to it.
Okay, sure. All right. Yeah, I think that falls in line with GGG.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, good.
Yeah, no, you don't want to agree to something. This is the problem, right? People set up agreements or rules, it's usually rules, and they agree to them, and then they really don't want to agree to them. And so they do something else.
To defeat that rule. And
they're going
to break that rule. For sure.
They're like, okay, fine, I'll agree to that. And then they don't really want to.
I think two good ways of finding out if you're invested in the rule or not is if you hear the word whatever or sure. Okay, whatever. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Or sure. Okay.
Or that's fine.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Sure.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, so if we hear those things, that might be indicators that we're not 100%.
Whatever.
Sure.
Or if someone's sarcastic, that's another dead giveaway.
Oh, Lucy, yeah, great comment, Lucy. Yeah, so they work on a plus, minus, or neutral principle, right?
Oh, I love that. We definitely try to be positive. Yeah, that's awesome. Love it. Love it.
All right.
And you're building out your agreement. So you decide on what your values are, and then you build out your agreement. So what we are suggesting, and I'm going to bring up a diagram.
I love diagrams. Let's see.
Diagram. Here's the basic model.
Oh, it's a sexy diagram too.
So we have.
That looks like a song I know. Do, say, do. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
We should make a song to go with it.
Okay. Right.
So basically, here's your, like, say you decide on 5 values, and then you put together a list of statements. These are the things I'll do or say. And I think in the definition of agreement, it also talked about these are the things that I'll accept. Accept is kind of like I'm wishy-washy.
It might be very empowering to say accept. Yeah, I choose to accept this.
Okay. I guess I just don't want the idea of it being fine.
I'm following Lucy's take here that we keep it positive.
Yeah. So these things you do and say would be framed in the positive. I will do this, I say this, we say this, we do this. And so if you can't think of some ideas of how you would put this together, because it is a bit abstract, you're like, okay, and we'll give you some examples. You can say like, what are the things do I or we need to do or to show or demonstrate that I value this value? Or what will I say to show or demonstrate that I do this? So for example,
I like the we part. I like the verbiage we.
But some things you will do, we each have responsibility, like I will do this as well, right?
From the I, yes.
So I'll show an example. I developed this first one working with a couple. They were talking about agreements, and so we talked about like what is our agreement, right? So some of the things that we value, these are correct, right? Consideration is a value, quality time, intimacy and connection, and honesty. So I've just thrown in a couple of examples here. So under consideration, I think consideration is probably a big one in our relationship, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Where do you see it being played out?
So I think it falls like a lot of things could fall under consideration. So I listen and ask for input when we are making a decision on something. I check in once when I'm on a date with someone. It doesn't have to be once, but like that's how I show consideration, so that you know I'm okay and that sort of thing.
And if you're out on a date with somebody, I might even extend myself and ask you, how are you doing? Like, how's the date working out? Like, are you good? Do you need like a rescue, or is it can I expect to see you next month or two, or like how is it going?
Yeah, for example, like I think one of ours as well is we have it listed here. So I let my partner know at least 2 days in advance when I plan it. Like that's when I plan a date with somebody.
Sure, because we become polysaturated, right? So the calendar might fill up, and you want to know, like, you and I might have a picnic, or I might want to be taking you out on a picnic, but all of a sudden, come to find out, oh no, you have a date that day, and I was like, what? Like I didn't know you didn't know. Oh yeah, like maybe I forgot to tell you. So there was a lack of consideration, as opposed to saying when we find out, like, I'm thinking about having a date in a couple of days. Not even that it's asking permission, but it's more the consideration that, like, just to give you a heads up, I'll be having a picnic on Wednesday. You're not invited.
You're not invited.
Yeah.
So those are some examples, or that I'll let my partner know when plans change, or like if you're out and you say you're going to be home at 10, like it's consideration, right?
Sure.
Yeah, and then quality time, like. I know this is a big issue with people, especially when they're starting off, is when we're watching TV together, that our phones are away, so that we're not, like when we are spending quality time together, if we're on a special date, you and I, or something like that, we're not, on our phone texting with other partners, like phones away, like we're fully present and paying attention to the partner.
So that's what it means. That's what the phones are about, being present.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes people get really distracted by the phones, right? And
well, you are going elsewhere, right?
Yeah. So, and even if you're not chatting with a partner, like say you and I are on a date and say somebody's messaging you, but you're like constantly on your phone, it feels like you're not being present in the, So under quality time, that might be a thing, is like I put away my phone when this comes up. So when we have dates. So those are some examples. And then we didn't give any examples under intimacy and connection. But the example I thought of, because we were talking a bit about this before we came live, is about STI testing.
Oh, yeah. A good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we like to be very upfront about that, right? And very normalized about it. We bring it up all the time with people that we meet. Potential partners or just people on the street, pretty much. I mean, we're big advocates for STI testing on a regular basis, whether you are symptomatic or not. It's just good health. It's like going to the dentist. Do it regularly and know it. But also, it's kind of the communal responsibility, right? That we want to be protecting of other people in the community. You don't want to be the typhoid Mary. You don't want to be the one who's spreading this and not know that you were the spreader, right? So if each person is a good steward of their health, then it will help protect our community.
Exactly. So one of our things is I will protect our sexual health by asking partners about their STI testing and using protection when engaging in intimate acts. So I recently went on a first date with someone, and we just met out, and I did ask them when we were out what their testing history was and what their last test was. And it's hard to sometimes ask that question, but sometimes. I don't know. It shouldn't be, but I don't want it to be. But yeah, but it was fine. It was met with like, wow, that's a really good question, and they had to think about it.
So they were receptive. How do you introduce it on a first date or whenever?
I just said, can I ask you a personal question? And they're like, yeah, sure. And it was pretty close to the end of the day, but the idea was we were going to get together again sometimes, and at some point that we might be intimate, right? So I thought this is the time to ask, not the next date, right? Because if they haven't been tested, then they have an opportunity to do that, right?
Some people even have it on their dating profile. They want people who are regularly tested, or that they announce that they themselves are regularly tested. And I think the more we talk about it, the more natural it becomes, right? The more casual it is. It's not this big scary thing. Like the first time you ever bring it up in a date, I remember for myself, the first time I ever announced anything about STI testing, I was concerned that the other person was going to think that I was this kind of sexual pervert or deviant, which I'm happy to be known by, but it was uncomfortable for me. And now it's just so matter of fact. It's like, well, and now we need to talk about STI testing, and like, let's just talk about it.
Yeah. Some people even COVID testing, like someone on a dating profile let me know that they weren't tested and they don't believe in the vaccine, and just wanted to let me know up front to know if it was like a non-starter for me.
Sure. Well, that's the same thing, right? So they also write that on their profiles. They'll say that they're vaxxed, double vaxxed, or no vax.
Cool. So that's our values-based agreement. We went over that really quickly. We just want to give you an idea of kind of what you could put together if this is something, if you're either new or you're struggling, but let us know if we can help you with this, because we do that. And if you need more help putting it together, because it can be very abstract, but I think it's important to work through these things. Because sometimes we make assumptions, like we said, right? And we don't want to make assumptions, because I think that because that can bring you to more difficulty.
Yeah, I think that's where the misunderstandings come from. And then when there is that type of misunderstanding, that is going to potentially lead to all of these conflicts.
Exactly. So let us know if you tried this exercise, and if it's been helpful to you, or what you use. Like, I'm curious as to if you have rules or agreements in your relationships and how they've worked. So you can drop them
how they haven't.
Or how they haven't.
Sure.
And if you, like we said, if you need help walking through this for yourself, then reach out and give us a call.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right.
That's Monday.
All right.
Wow, almost an hour. Jeez.
I'm going.
Thank you so much for watching live or in the replay, and we will see you next Monday.
Yay. Bye.
Bye.